Hi there. My name is Robert Foreman, and this is part of my Substack on how to think about Christian language and how to think about religious language in general. And it's a sunny day here in Great Barrington, and that's why my chin here looks like it's all white. Oh well. Today is the reading for what's this called? The Sunday closest to June the 20th, the proper seven. And today's reading, I find today's reading actually really interesting because it's about an aspect of the spiritual life and of most people's lives, frankly, that most of us have to deal with. Certainly, all of us who are serious about our spiritual life, we have to deal with this. Today is about the emotional rub of leading a spiritual life. It's not something that most of us on the spiritual path like to talk about, but it's an important one to talk about. And the reason is that all of us feel sometimes that when we're committed to a spiritual life, we get, how to put this nicely, we get a fair amount of shit from people that don't. We get a fair amount of ridicule. We get a fair amount of criticism. We get a lot of people that don't recognize what we're doing. We get a lot of people that think what we're doing is crazy. We're not living the life of others. We're not oriented in the same way that others are oriented. We're not we're not playing by the rules. And as a result, people are mostly not understanding what we're about, and so they tend to either ridicule what we're doing, or they tend to joke about it, or they tend to just think we're doing something wrong. Most others, for example, are simply trying to earn a living, earn a nest egg. But in the spiritual life, that's really not my orientation. When some are oriented towards status and towards fame or towards, being highly respected by their neighbors. In the spiritual life, that is not what we're about. I mean, to some extent, there's a orientation towards status. A lot of spiritual people say, "Hey, I had such and such a guru," so there's this kind of status thing. But no, on the spiritual path, generally, we live by a different kind of aspiration. We have our own way of orienting a life and judging a life. This actually, well, let me tell you a story. When I was 23, I think it was time for me. I wanted to go to to a 9-month meditation retreat. It was offered by the Transcendental Meditation people, and Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was going to be there. And it looked like a great course. And as it turned out, it was a great course. But I went to my dad, and I said to my dad and mom that I wanted to take some of my money out of the bank. I was lucky enough to inherit a little money. I wanted to take some of my money out of the bank and go to this course. It was going to be, as I recall, 2,500 bucks for 9 months, which at the time was a fair amount of money. My parents had no idea why I was doing this. They thought I was in some sort of cult. They thought I was crazy. They didn't know why I wanted to do this. It was just too much money. It went on and on. We had a conversation like that all afternoon. And they simply never understood why it was that I wanted to do this crazy thing. And I think all of us on the spiritual path get that kind of response from people, from parents, from other friends, whatnot. I think this is true not only of the spiritual life, but I think it's also true of any life that's oriented towards something higher. You know, lawyers can be oriented, of course, lawyers make a lot of money, but lawyers can be oriented towards justice, and in fact can be oriented towards more justice than our courts offer. Musicians are oriented towards something that may or may not prove to be a moneymaker, mostly not. But they're oriented towards making music because that's the kind of life they want to live, and that's the value they want to live by. Same is true with poets or writers in general. Here I've spent all this time writing my books. Plug, plug. Here's Christianity Reimagined, a mystical approach for doubters and the dubious. And it took me 9 years to write it. And frankly, I thought, and other people thought I was crazy for spending that kind of time writing this book. Um, so our orientation, let me get out of the light here. How's this a little better? Our orientation is something that's not the traditional values. And if you do live your life in a way that's aiming at the spiritual reality or anything higher, because you do, others will not understand what you're about. And because they don't understand what you're about, they will tend to laugh at you and ridicule you. Okay, here's what I want to show you is the reading for today. Come on, giddy up. So here's the reading for today. And he says, because the author of this, Jeremiah, says he's oriented towards the divine, he's oriented towards God, or in my frame, he's oriented towards the spiritual reality. And he says, I've become a laughing stock all day long. Everyone mocks me. He's become a reproach. Where's that? He's become a reproach and a derision all day long. And, it's like people reproach you. People think you're crazy. And I want to say, if you're listening to this, people will probably look at you and say, why are you listening to this? Why are you doing this? Why are you living your life in that way? Why are you living your life oriented in that way? And I want to say, it's become a reproach and a derision all day long. It's what you get from the other people in your world. And then you think to yourself, well, maybe I could just deny what I know to be true. Maybe I could just deny what I'm really about. And all of us do that, I think. We all sort of pretend to be oriented in a different way, and we do what we often call masking. I'm masking what my real interest is. I'm what's it called? Chord switching? No, code switching. I'm code switching, and I switch and pretend to be oriented in the way other people say. And that's why he says, if I say I will not mention him or speak his name anymore, in other words, he's code switching. He's saying, I'll just keep my interests hidden. I'll keep my orientation hidden. Because it's a reproach. To be oriented that way is a reproach. He comes to him as a reproach and he gets to ride it all day long. So he says, maybe I should just not mention it. Maybe I should code switch. Maybe I should not speak his name anymore. But then, of course, he says, okay, if I hold it in what I know to be right, if I hold it in, see the way he's saying hold it in? And I cannot. Oh, he says, I am weary with holding it in. He says, when I try to hold it in, it sort of bubbles up anyway. And he says, I cannot hold it in. That's what this is about. I can't hold it in. When I'm really oriented towards the divine, I'm oriented towards the infinite, I'm oriented towards God. I can't hold that in. That's just what is true for me. And he goes on to say, when he does that, there is within me, down here a little more, oh, there is within me. I can't find it. If he says, I will not mention him or speak in his name anymore, There is within me something like, here it is. Within me, there is something like a burning fire shut up in my bones. That's a wonderful description of when you have something that you know to be true, when you have something that's more valuable than the way you're living your life or other people are living their life. It's like you're holding in the truth, and that gets really difficult. And he says it's something like a burning fire shut up in my bones. Great image. Something like a burning fire shut up in my bones. And then he says, I'm weary with holding it in. I just can't do it anymore. Jesus in one of the Gospels, the reading, Gospel reading for today, Jesus says, don't think I've come to bring, down here, don't think I've come to bring peace to the earth. I've not come to bring peace, but a sword. I've come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, daughter-in-law against mother-in-law. One's foes will be members of one's own household. And remember the story I told you about my dad and my mom telling him I wanted to go off and meditate and spend some money? It was like there was a war there. And I really was set against my father, and my father was set against me. And that's the way this is. Do not think I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace. It's that moment with my dad, that moment with my mom was not a moment of peace. It was not a moment of sort of kumbaya. They were pissed off. They were really upset. They thought I was really wasting my money and their money, and they thought this is not right and I shouldn't do this. And so they denounced me, as the text says. They denounced me. Then he says, if I give in, where's this one? Can't find it. He says, if I give in, it will be like I sink into the mire, sink into the muck, to give in, to live your life according to somebody else's value system, to deny what you know to be true, to deny the real depth of the infinite. It's like you're sinking into the mire. It's like you're lying to yourself and to other people. But, Jesus says that to deny this, in our gospel readings for today, if they call the master of the house Beelzebul, in other words, if they call the master of the house the devil, how much more will they malign those of his household? In other words, it's easy to say, oh, the guy's crazy, it's just the devil talking, etc. But don't keep your truth hidden, he says. Nothing is covered up that will not be uncovered. Nothing is secret that will not become known. This reminds me of the fact that you can't keep a secret in Washington, that old saying. You can't keep a secret in Washington because whatever it is that you're oriented to will come out eventually. And what you're oriented to, the spirit that you're oriented to, the truth that you have, eventually it will be uncovered and it will become obvious that what you're really standing for. So he's saying, what I say to you in the dark, tell it in the light. In other words, don't keep it secret. Go ahead, do what you can to let it out. What you hear whispered, proclaim from the housetops. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to others. Go ahead and allow this to come out. Allow it to come out because it is what you're about. And that is, I think, deeply important. Not just important, but deeply important because otherwise you won't be able to live your life in the light. You won't be able to live your life oriented towards the truth. You'll be constantly trying to be what somebody else wants you to be. And that will simply not do. Okay, then, what's the answer? What do we do about this? What do we do when somebody maligns us? What do we do? What do we do when we live our life committed to something higher and we get rejected? And here I think the text offered two different answers. The first is this one here in red. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. In other words, if you lose your life, the life of busyness, the life of money, the life of fame, glory, if you lose your life for the sake of the infinite, you will find something. You will find a life. You will find a sense of value that you didn't know you had, that you didn't know was there. To lose your life on behalf of the infinite, to live your life oriented towards the infinite, in other words, you will be finding something. To live your life for the infinite is its own reward. So he's saying, sometimes I forget this. But to live your life for the infinite, you will find your life in a way that you didn't know you could. The second answer here, I'm a little more, I have a little more trouble with. Let's see if we can do this. Where is it? Ah, here it is. Here, the orientation is that the divine is like a warrior. And I think what we're saying here is I want to have my life oriented towards deeper values. But the text also says, and I want you to do harm to the people that don't get this. I want you to do harm to them. I want you to save me, but I also want you to damage them, the people that have ridiculed me. Sometimes I think about Mr. Trump and I think he will get his comeuppance. His Republican followers will get their comeuppance. And that's kind of what this is saying. Let them get their comeuppance. Let them crash and burn. They will get their karma. They will get their due rewards, which are lousy. So it's like, I want the Lord, I want the, no, what the text is saying is, I want the Lord to be with me like a dreaded warrior. I want the Lord to be that powerful. But the wish that we have isn't that I want some Superman-like deity to come and smite them. Rather, I want them to get their just rewards. I want them to be harmed in the process because they've harmed me. And so I want my wishes to be fulfilled. And that's what we're saying here. So the first answer to this is, I want you to find your own life. I want to, we will find our own life. The life lived oriented towards spirit is its own reward. The second one, though, is that the people that oppose us, the people that think differently, I want them to get their just deserts. I want them to be harmed in the way I've been harmed. And that's what this psalm is saying. Let my persecutors stumble. Let them not prevail. That's what the second answer to this business of they have ridiculed me. Let them be shamed. Let them be greatly shamed. Let them not succeed. Whether or not this works, whether or not people that have made fun of us, people that have ridiculed us and told us that we're on the wrong path, we want them to not succeed. We want them to be shamed, recognize what they've done. That may or may not work, but that's the wish here. And that's what this is articulating. So that the upshot of all this is when people have ridiculed us, when we have been made to feel ashamed, because we're oriented towards a different set of values than other people, we hope that it is its own reward, and generally it is. And we also hope that people that are doing that will crash and burn. And I think that's pretty much what I wanted to say about this.